Imagine you're a burger flipper in Manhattan. You've been hearing the same promise for years. The $30 minimum wage is coming. And then it actually happens. Your city elects a new mayor, Zoran Mamdani, who has pledged to hike your pay from $16.50 an hour today to a staggering $30 by 2030. On paper, you've just won the lottery, but in reality, you might have just gotten fired. This is the great paradox of the modern minimum wage. We are living through the most extreme global experiment in minimum wage in human history. And according to The Economist, the scholars who pushed for this are suddenly getting very cold feet. The point is not that the federal minimum wage is enough to live on, because clearly in most states it is not. Thankfully, only a few are living on the current minimum wage in the US. The point is that raising minimum wage, especially in states and countries where it has somewhat kept up with inflation, is doing the wrong thing for the right reasons. For decades, the minimum wage was the boring sector of economics. You had the old school crowd who used simple supply and demand to argue that if you make labor more expensive, companies simply use less of it. Then, in 1994, David Card and Alan Kruger published a landmark study on fast food workers in New Jersey and Pennsylvania that suggested a higher wage floor didn't actually destroy jobs. That single finding launched a new era of minimum wage politics. Politicians loved it because it allowed them to fight inequality without spending a dime of taxpayer money. But as we push these wage floors higher and higher, we are hitting a ceiling of unintended consequences. In Britain, the minimum wage has surged from 47% of median earnings to 61% in just a decade. This means that the legal pay floor in Britain is now much closer to what the average person earns than it was 10 years ago, effectively narrowing the gap between the lowest paid workers and the middle class. In Mexico, the ratio has doubled, hitting 74%. We are no longer talking about modest adjustments. We are talking about a total restructuring of how businesses work. The problem, as The Economist puts it, is that raising minimum wages is a crude and wasteful tool for redistribution. Why would they claim that? Because many people earning the minimum wage aren't actually poor. They are, quote, rich kids with a holiday job or part-time second earners in high-income households. Meanwhile, the truly vulnerable, the people this policy is meant to save, are the ones who pay the ultimate price through what I like to call the spiral of deterioration. Believe me, I'm not trying to protect the rich kids with their holiday jobs. This is about protecting the people who actually need the jobs to stay afloat. When a company can't fire you because of a wage hike, they don't just shrug and take the hit to their margins. They start cutting corners that don't show up in the unemployment statistics. According to new research, big increases in the minimum wage are associated with shorter, less predictable working hours and a spike in workplace injuries. Why? Because bosses start pushing their staff harder and faster to justify the higher cost of their time. It's like increasing the pace of the treadmill for the workers. And then there's the hiring ghost. A study of Seattle's massive pay hikes in 2015 found that, while existing workers kept their jobs, the hiring of new low-wage workers slowed by a massive 10%. The effective minimum wage in America has now reached around $12 an hour, but the threshold where this starts to actually distort the economy is likely under $8. We are well past the point of correcting the market. We are now actively breaking it. And don't think for a second that the market will save you by making things more affordable. It's actually the opposite. In the housing market, for instance, banks are actively moving the goalposts so you can take on more debt because you can't afford the house. Zillow is trialing 1% down payments just to help people make the biggest financial commitment of their lives when they haven't saved a dime. When wages rise, so do the real estate prices. It's a circus where houses earn more per year in price appreciation than the average person makes in salary. When you pump up the minimum wage, you aren't helping a worker buy a home, you're just giving the bank an excuse to let them lend more money, because the same home has now gone up in price. Take a look at the broken care economy in England. The Financial Times reports that 60% of care workers received a pay bump when the minimum wage rose to £12.21. Sounds great, right? Except that the work and service providers, the nursing homes, are fast losing the headroom needed to actually run their businesses because of rising labor costs. When 75% of your overhead is human beings, and the government rises the price of those humans but refuses to increase the fees they pay you to house residents, you are trapped. The result is a spectacular car crash of incentives. Care work is a low-paid, high-turnover sector, where a worker with 5 years of experience earns a pay premium of exactly 7 cents an hour more than a fresh recruit. Yes, you heard that correctly. 7 cents. That is the price of your loyalty and expertise. It's no wonder care managers live in terror of a local Aldi opening nearby, because they know they will lose their entire staff to a supermarket that can actually afford to pay a few pennies more. And if you think this is just a business problem, look at the kids. Britain has seen a disturbing rise in the number of so-called NEETs, young people not in education, employment or training. Stephen Bush at the Financial Times suggests that the rising wage floor is part of the problem. If a teenager with zero skills costs the same as a worker with a decade of experience, who do you think the manager is going to hire? We are effectively pulling up the ladder on the next generation before they can even get a foot on the first step. If the so-called NEETs don't scare you, the robots should. Companies have been trying to get rid of workers since the dawn of time, but AI is finally giving them the perfect excuse. A study by Metrogy found that companies using AI in contact centers hired 89% more AI agents than those who didn't. When you force a $30 minimum wage, you are essentially hand-delivering an excuse for automation to every CEO on Wall Street. They don't want to pay you, they want to cater to whales, the tiny fraction of people who actually have money. It's a death of the 9 to 5 where regular workers are the primary losers. We are entering a doom loop. Higher wages lead to higher costs for companies, which leads to higher prices for consumers. Thomas McCurdy of Stanford University found that the effect of minimum wage-induced price hikes in America is more regressive than a state sales tax. This means it hits the poor the hardest. You get a raise on Friday, and on Saturday your groceries and rent have gone up by even more to pay for everyone else's raise. The Resolution Foundation, a historically left-leaning think tank, has warned the British government to tread carefully as they scrap lower rates for young workers. Even the most loyal supporters of raising the minimum wage are realizing that more is rarely enough. The responsible option, as The Economist argues, is to stop. We have better tools for fighting poverty, like tax credits, that are actually targeted at the poor, rather than being a one-size-fits-all solution that causes severe rationing at some firms, while others just pass the cost to the consumer. If the goal is truly to lift people out of poverty, we have to stop trying to impose a minimum wage type solution to try and fix the problem. The reality is that in-work tax credits and direct transfer payments are far better tools for the job. Unlike a wage floor that treats a teenager in a mansion the same as a single mother in the inner city, tax credits can be surgically targeted to those who actually need them. It avoids the doom loop of higher costs being passed on to consumers as higher prices, a cycle that effectively acts as a regressive tax on the very poor we claim to be helping. I'm not taking a stance on whether this should be implemented or not, but what I am saying is that there is a better solution with the same outcome. We are currently watching a massive global experiment in real time, and the results are starting to look catastrophic for the very people it was supposed to help. The minimum wage hike is the latest display of the absurdity of the financial world. It's a spectacular display of flawed logic that sounds great in a 30-second campaign ad, but falls apart the second it hits a balance sheet. If you want to stay informed on the world's most expensive experiments and how they are quietly draining your future wealth, you know what to do. Hit the subscribe button. If you enjoyed this video, go check out this one on why software companies are falling off at an alarming rate. Thank you for watching.